Please, sing something, anyone. He cannot go into the ground in silence. It was 2:10 on a Thursday morning in March, in the basement morning hall of a hospital in Songpa, when Adaeze Okonkwo, 11 days from the end of her caregiver visa, set down her mop. The old woman asking held nothing. The family that owned the empty chairs held a name printed on half the buildings in Seoul. Adaeze expected to bow, apologize, and finish the floor before the 6 o'clock shift. What she sang instead would be played back in a boardroom before the week ended. The hall had been paid for generously. That was the strange part. 40 chrysanthemum wreaths stood shoulder to shoulder along both walls, each ribbon lettered in gold, each sender important enough to have the flowers delivered, and nobody sent to sit beside them. The incense had burned down to gray stubs. On the low table by the door, a stack of white condolence envelopes waited, untouched, the top one unsealed and empty, no name written on the front. Adaeze had mopped that hall 11 nights in a row and had never once seen a mourner kneel in it. The old woman wore a hanbok that did not fit her anymore, the sleeves pinned at the wrist with safety pins. She had been the man's housekeeper for 31 years, though she did not say so yet. She only said that the funeral director had told her the burial was at 7, that the sons were not coming, that a person should not be sent into the ground with no voice over him. Adaeze thought about her visa. She thought about the 14 minutes left on her break, about the supervisor who counted minutes, about the money she wired home to Enugu on the 15th of every month. Then she looked at the photograph on the altar, an old man, unsmiling, in a suit too formal for a face that tired, and something in her chest turned over. She did not know his name. She would learn it soon enough, and so would everyone else. 14 minutes, that was the arithmetic of it. 14 minutes before Mr. Ha's clipboard found the gap in the third-floor rotation, before the elevator logs showed a cleaning cart parked outside morning room 3 in the basement of Hansong Medical Center at 2:40 on a Wednesday morning. 3 weeks before her subcontract came up for renewal, 6 weeks before her visa followed the contract wherever it went. Adaeze did the sum the way she did every sum in this country, quickly, silently, without letting her face carry any of it. Then she looked again at the scrap of paper in the old woman's hand, a pharmacy receipt, folded into quarters, soft at the creases from being opened too many times, on the back, in Hangul that shook the whole way across the paper. Nore Hanaman, Amuna. One song, anyone. He wrote it in March, the woman said. Her name was Yoon Bak-hee, and she had bathed and fed and argued with the man in the photograph for 11 years. He could still hold a pen in March. She pressed the receipt flatter with her thumb, as though the shaking letters might straighten. The family arranged everything. Flowers from Jeju, rice cakes nobody will eat. The singer they hired canceled at midnight, and the agency said, morning, maybe 8 o'clock, maybe 9, and by 9 the coffin goes. Her chin did something complicated and stopped. There is no one here. There was, in fact, no one there. Adaeze had counted them too. 2 funeral hall attendants in black vests scrolling their phones beside the ice machine, one of whom had said, "That's not our work." With the flat kindness of a man who had been asked for many strange things at 2 in the morning, a distant nephew asleep sitting up, tie loosened, phone face down on his knee, a security guard who had looked at the ceiling when Mrs. Yoon asked him, 96 white chrysanthemums arranged in a wall around a photograph. Enough incense to make the air taste like a temple. 12 pairs of guest slippers in a row, and none of them turned outward. She thought about the money she wired on the 15th. Her mother's dialysis in Enugu was Tuesdays and Fridays and did not care about anybody's grief. She thought about the way Mr. Ha said her name, the wrong way always, the last syllable clipped like something being trimmed off, and how he had told her twice this month that there were 4 Vietnamese women waiting for her shift. 14 minutes. She could be back at the 3rd floor supply closet in 11, and nobody would ever know she had stood here. What did he like? Adaeze asked. Mrs. Yoon blinked. What? To sing. What did he like to sing? Hymns. The old woman's voice cracked open on the word. He was baptized in Busan when he was 9. He said the nuns fed him barley. He sang badly. Adaeze set the mop against the wall. She peeled off the blue rubber gloves and pushed them into the pocket of her uniform, and her hands came out smelling of lemon disinfectant, which is not incense, which is not myrrh, which would have to do. She stepped out of her work shoes at the edge of the mat. One sock had a hole at the heel. She noticed it and decided it was between her and God. Then she walked up the mat to the altar and knelt on the cushion the way she had watched 300 Korean mourners kneel, badly, but in the correct order, and she bowed twice to a man whose name she had not yet read on the placard. Her grandmother had been the one they called for wakes in Enugu. Not the choir, not the catechist. Nay, with her wrapper knotted high and her hands folded at her waist, singing the crossing songs while the men dug. Adaeze had held her hand at 9 funerals before she was 12. She had learned that you do not sing to comfort the dead. The dead are past comfort. You sing so the room stops being a room where something terrible has happened and becomes a room where somebody is being carried. She started low, because the ceiling was low. Onyega eduzim nuzoa. The Igbo came out of her in a register she had not used since Lagos Airport. It filled the small room, and then it kept going, out past the ice machine, down the corridor of morning rooms 1 through 6, where the fluorescent lights buzzed and a vending machine dropped a can nobody had bought. The nephew woke. One of the attendants in the black vest lowered his phone very slowly, as though a loud noise might break something. Mrs. Yun sat down on the floor without bending properly, both hands over her mouth, and rocked. Adaeze sang the second verse in Korean, because she had learned the hymn twice in her life, and because the man had been baptized in Busan and fed barley by nuns, and it seemed right that he should be sent off in the language the barley came in. She did not hear the elevator. At the far end of the corridor, a man in a black overcoat stood where the light gave out. He had come 3 hours early because he had not been able to sit in the car any longer, and he had raised one finger to keep the 2 men behind him from following, and he had been standing there for the length of a whole verse without remembering to breathe properly. He had buried his mother in a hall like this one. He had heard 4 professional cantors, 1 bishop, and a president's condolence telegram read aloud in a voice like a fax machine. He had never once heard anyone sing to his father. His secretary came up on his left with a phone already lit. "Chairman, don't," Kang Do-yun said. He did not ask who she was. Not yet. He asked something else first. Who arranged this? The funeral director had been holding his clipboard against his chest for 4 minutes, the way a man holds a door he is not sure will stay shut. The district office, Chairman. Explain that. When a death is registered and no family claims the body, the ward office pays for a public farewell. 10 minutes of hall time, a photograph, 3 chairs. He swallowed. It is called a solitary death. We handle 2 or 3 a month. How long? Sir, how long was he in your building before today? The clipboard came down an inch. 11 days. The office searches the family register during that period. Letters are sent. To what address? The director consulted the page he already knew by heart and read out a lot number in Yeongdong-po-gu, and the air in the corridor went very thin. Do-yun knew the number. His own company had bought that block in a bundle of 41 parcels, cleared it in 9 weeks, and put a 40-story tower on it with a lobby fountain that cost more than the hall he was standing in. The letter telling him his father was dead had been delivered to a hole in the ground his own excavators had made, and returned marked undeliverable, and filed. He looked at the photograph on the altar. Someone had enlarged it from a health insurance card. The pixels had gone soft as wet paper, and in the bottom corner there was still the ghost of an official stamp nobody had thought to crop away. His father was wearing a collar he did not recognize. His father was 81 years old and looked, in that terrible blurred rectangle, faintly amused about something. The register, Do-yun said. The mourner's book. They brought it. 4 ruled lines had been offered. 3 were used. A care worker from the rooming house. The landlady, who had written her name, and then, in smaller characters, rent paid to the end of the month, no debt. A clerk from the ward office who had signed with a rubber stamp. The 4th line was blank. She didn't sign, Do-yun said. Who, Chairman? The woman who sang. The hall manager arrived at exactly that moment, out of breath, already apologizing with his whole spine. Chairman, I take full responsibility. She is not our staff. She is with the cleaning contractor, the night crew. She is absolutely not permitted inside a chapel during a service. She abandoned her cart in the west corridor. The floors weren't buffed. She will be dealt with tonight, I promise you. She'll be off the roster by... Say that sentence again. The manager stopped. Do-yun did not raise his voice. He had not raised his voice in 19 years. The men who worked for him had learned to fear the opposite. Which sentence? She will be dealt with. No. He handed the register back without looking at it. Nobody touches her employment. Not her hours, not her contract, not her name on any list. If she has docked a single one for tonight, the person who signs that form will explain it to me personally. He turned to his secretary, who had already put the lit phone away and produced a pen. Get me her name. The secretary was gone 11 minutes. She came back with a badge number, a subcontractor's logo, and no name. The night crew was hired through an agency that was hired through a facilities company that the hall retained on a 2-year contract. And somewhere in that chain, a woman had been reduced to a 4-digit code and a shift block. On the corridor camera, she was a dark shape in a gray uniform, one hand on a mop handle, standing in a doorway for 6 minutes and 11 seconds before she went in. Do-yoon watched the clip twice. He watched a woman decide. At that hour, she was on the 6512 bus, with her uniform in a plastic bag and a written warning folded into quarters in her coat pocket. The form had 3 boxes. Location deviation. Task incomplete. Reason. In the reason box her supervisor had written, in the flattest possible handwriting, employee states she was singing. 4 words. No punctuation, no question mark, nothing to suggest the woman who wrote them had paused even a second over their strangeness. Adaize read them 3 times between Yoido and the tunnel, the paper trembling slightly with the bus, and each time the sentence got smaller and heavier, the way stones do in water. At the top of the form, printed in machine capitals, OBI, Adaize, Care Aid, Night Rotation. Agency ED 3391. She did the arithmetic she always did, in Naira and then in won, because her mind still crossed that bridge in both directions. 1 written warning meant 30% of the night's fee withheld. 2 meant a review. 3 meant the agency notified immigration that her sponsored employment had ended, and a woman with a nursing degree from Enugu and a license conversion exam in 7 weeks became a woman with a suitcase and 11 days to leave. Her mother's blood pressure tablets were 40,000 won a month. Her brother's fees were due in September. The exam fee was non-refundable and already paid. 42 minutes, she thought. 42 minutes of singing in a room where nobody had come. The bus hissed at Silim, and she stepped down into air that smelled of frying batter and wet asphalt. Up 4 flights, past the landing where somebody's kimchi refrigerator hummed all night, into the room she shared with Marilu and Grace. 2 beds and a mattress on the floor, 3 plastic drawer towers, 1 window that opened onto a wall. Marilu was asleep with her phone still lit on her chest. Adaize hung her uniform on the door hook so the creases would fall out, set the warning form on top of her exam workbook, and put water on for tea she was too tired to drink. She had reasons to walk past that room. Practical reasons. Necessary reasons. She had gone in anyway. 9 kilometers east, in a house with heated stone floors and no sound in it, Lee Do-yeon was still holding a book. It was the mourner's register from Hall 3. Gray cloth cover, gold-stamped lines, 96 ruled entries for names and titles and companies, the kind of book that filled in an hour when the man in the refrigerated drawer had been the man his father had been. His father had built 41,000 apartments, 2 ports, a shipping arm, a bank. Chairmen had sent wreaths tall as door frames. The wreaths had arrived. The men who sent them had gone to the Hall 1 funeral of a former minister across the corridor, where the cameras were, and signed that book instead. 95 lines in his father's register were empty. Line 1 read, in careful ballpoint, in Latin letters slanting slightly uphill, A. Obi. And in the column headed, Relationship to the Deceased, where the guests of a chaebol chairman would have written, Nephew, Sai, Director, The Hansong Group, Vice President. She had written 1 English word, none. Do-yoon set the book on the low table beside the security laptop and pressed the arrow key again. The footage had no sound. That was the part that kept him there past 3 in the morning, unshaven, still in the shirt he had worn to the crematorium, a silent camera in the corner of a room, timestamp burning in the top right, and a woman in a navy Care-Aid jacket standing in the doorway at 02:03:17 with a plastic bag hanging from her wrist. Behind her, the corridor lights. In front of her, a portrait on an easel, a table of white chrysanthemums, and Mrs. Yang, 78, who had cooked in his father's house for 31 years and had refused to sit down all night, both hands out, saying something the camera could not hear. The woman looked at the corridor. She looked at her phone. She looked at the corridor again, and Do-yoon understood, watching it the second time, that she was not deciding whether to be kind. She was deciding what it would cost, item by item, the way a person counts money in a pocket without taking it out. 2 minutes and 11 seconds. Then she put the plastic bag down on a chair, took off her shoes, and walked in. His father had died on a Wednesday afternoon at 4:20, with 2 nurses and a lawyer in the room. Do-yoon had been in a shareholders meeting in Yeouido that he could not leave without the share price learning something. He had signed a document at 4:20 that he did not remember signing. He had gone to the hospital, arranged the hall, chosen the portrait, approved the obituary, and sat in Hall 3 for 2 nights while the wreaths came and the people did not. And at 1 in the morning he had gone back to the office because there was a filing deadline in Singapore, and he had left an old woman alone with his father's body. At 02:03:17, a stranger had put her shoes by the door. On the screen, she stood at the foot of the coffin with her hands folded at her waist, chin lifted, entirely still, and then her chest expanded and her mouth opened, and the room filled with something no camera in that building could record. Mrs. Yang lowered herself onto the floor cushion. At 02:19, she was weeping into both palms. At 02:31, the night attendant appeared in the corridor doorway and did not interrupt. At 02:45, the woman in the navy jacket was still singing. And at 02:52, a small figure entered the frame from the left, in pajama trousers and a puffer jacket over them, because his grandfather's driver had brought him, and nobody had told Do-yeon. Ha-jun, 7 years old, silent since the March his mother died. 14 months of speech therapists, drawing tests, doctors saying, elective mutism. And give him time. The boy stopped 3 meters from the woman and stood there listening with his mouth slightly open. Do-yeon paused the video on that frame. He had watched it 11 times, and the 11th had not changed what happened next. His son, in the back of the car at 4 in the morning, forehead against the window, humming 8 notes he could not possibly have known. Do-yeon picked up his phone and called the head of building security. The camera in Hall 3, he said. The woman, I want the badge number on her lanyard, and I want it before 9. The badge number arrived at 8:52, 8 minutes inside the deadline, in an email with 3 attachments and no greeting. H3472. Nwachukwu Adaeze, 26, Nigerian passport, D2 student visa with part-time work permission. Employer, Miraya Song Facility Services, which held the night cleaning contract for the funeral hall, which had been subcontracted from Hansong Environmental Solutions, which was a wholly owned subsidiary of the group whose name was carved into the granite above the hospital doors. Do-yeon read the chain twice. 3 companies stood between his family's name and the woman who had knelt to wipe wax off the floor of Hall 3, and every one of those companies belonged, in the end, to him. The second attachment was a scanned dismissal notice, filed at 6:04 that morning. Task incomplete. Reason. And then, in that flat ballpoint hand, employee was singing in the mourner's hall, unauthorized, warned previously about attitude. Do-yeon sat with the cursor blinking beside the word. Singing. 14 months, 7 specialists, a drawing test where Ha-jun had been asked to sketch his family and had drawn the kitchen with nobody in it, a psychiatrist in Cheongdam who used the phrase, give him time. The way other men said, good weather, and a woman on her knees at 4 in the morning with a bucket and a blue lanyard and 8 notes in the back of a car. He pressed the intercom. Yoon Se-rin. His chief of staff came in with her tablet already open, because she had been outside the door since 7 and had learned in 6 years never to arrive empty-handed. Mirai Song Facility Services, he said. Guro branch, find out where she is now. Se-rin's stylist paused. Chairman, the funeral procession leaves at 11. The board memorial is at 2. The Japanese delegation, where she is now, he said, in the same voice he used for numbers. At that hour, Adaeze was standing in a corridor in Guro-dong that smelled of instant coffee and floor wax, holding her own uniform in a plastic bag, doing arithmetic. 1,900,000 won a month. Tuition for the autumn term of the care assistant program, due in 5 weeks, 2,800,000 won. She had 1,340,000 in the passbook under her mattress, in an envelope folded twice so it lay flat, and 5 weeks in which to find the rest. She did the arithmetic the way she always did it, in Igbo first and then in Korean, because numbers lied less in two languages. Rent on the rooftop room in Sindabang-dong, 420,000. Gas and water, 40. Transport card, 70. Rice, eggs, cabbage, the cheap frozen mackerel from the Saturday market, 250. Home, 500. Every month on the 9th, for her mother's blood pressure tablets and the last year of Chidinma's fees. The night premium on the Memorial Hall rotation, 11 to 7, was 260,000 a month, and it was the entire reason she had asked for the graveyard shift instead of the daytime office towers, where the air was warm and the floors were carpet. Team leader Baek Young-ho did not ask her to sit. He kept the incident report squared to the edge of his desk with 2 fingers, the way a man keeps a hand on a document he intends to send upward. Zone 4, 3 floors, restrooms and the family lounges, he said. Between 4:20 and 5:10 you were not in Zone 4. No, Adaeze said. He waited. In 6 years of managing subcontracted staff, Beck had learned that most people filled a silence with excuses, and excuses were easier to write down than facts. I was in Hall 3, she said. Doing what? Singing. The word landed in the small office and sat there. Behind Beck, on the wall, the Mirae-song contract calendar showed the Memorial Hall's dates blocked in red through the end of the week. He had been chasing that contract renewal since March. 11 staff depended on it. He was not a cruel man, and that was precisely the problem. Cruelty would have been simpler. There was a guest complaint, he said. Was there? There was a note from the hall's night manager. He turned the page so she could see it, which was its own kind of courtesy. Unauthorized person present in morning hall, vocal disturbance. Do you understand what that means for us? Do you know how many companies want this building? He was alone, Adaeze said. The chairs were empty. The photograph was there and the incense had gone out and there was nobody in the room with him. That is not your zone, no. She held her plastic bag with her folded uniform in it against her hip. But a person should not go out of the world in an empty room. Baek looked at the report. He wrote nothing for a moment. Then he wrote, in handwriting that had long ago given up on beauty, 3 lines. Removal from the Memorial Hall rotation effective immediately, 3 days suspension without pay, written warning to be copied to her school's foreign student office for her part-time permit file. He said, sign here. If you sign, it stays at branch level. She read it slowly. She read the 3rd line twice, because the 3rd line was the one with teeth. The permit file was the thin paper bridge between the money she earned and the visa that let her earn it, and every stamp on it was a stone somebody could take out later. If I do not sign, then it goes to head office as an unresolved case, and head office does not know you, and head office likes clean numbers. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. Adaeze, 2 years, no lateness, no breakages. Everyone knows this. That is why it is 3 days and not the door. She signed. Her hand did not shake, which surprised her later, on the stairs. Mrs. Oh Myung-ja was waiting by the mop sinks with 2 triangle rice balls, 1 tuna, 1 already opened, because she had been unable to wait. She was 63 and had been cleaning buildings in Guro since before the buildings had elevators. 3 days, she said. 3 days, and I lose the night. I go. Mrs. O pushed the unopened rice ball into her hands. The night is the money. Yes. Next time, sing quietly. It was a burial song, Adaeze said. There is no quiet version. Mrs. O laughed, then stopped laughing, and patted her twice on the forearm, with a hand like a bundle of twigs. That was the whole of the comfort available in the corridor at 8:50 in the morning, and Adaeze took it. On the bus, she opened the calculator app and made the numbers say it plainly, because she had learned young that hope is a poor accountant. 3 unpaid days, 219,000 gone. The night premium, 260,000 a month gone, which over the 5 weeks before the tuition deadline came to roughly 1,460,000 short, had become just over 2 million short. There were not enough hours left in 5 weeks. There were not enough hours in 7, which meant the autumn term would have to wait until spring, which meant the care assistant certificate would come a year late, and the hospital support job that required it a year late, and the visa change that required that a year later still. And her mother would go on saying, on the phone, in her patient voice, Ada, you are working too hard for a country that does not know your name. She had not told her mother about February. In February, her father had been buried in Enugu on a Tuesday morning, while Adaeze stood in a stairwell in Yeongdungpo with her phone held sideways, watching the grave through her cousin's cracked screen, listening to the women sing him out. The connection dropped during the second verse. She had opened her mouth in the stairwell and no sound came, because a woman singing alone in a Korean stairwell at 4 in the morning becomes a complaint to the building manager long before it becomes a farewell. So she had closed her mouth. She had climbed back up to 402, pressed her uniform flat with her palms because the iron had died in March, and stood at the bus stop by 5:10 with her hands folded and her eyes dry. 11 months later, the file was still on her phone. 41 seconds, shot sideways, the frame lurching every time her cousin shifted her weight. Red earth, a blue plastic chair, somebody's forearm. Adaeze had watched it in the toilet cubicle on her breaks. Sound off, the way other women looked at pictures of children they had left behind. In the small family room behind Hall 3, the air conditioner clicked and started again. It was 2:40 in the morning. The chrysanthemums had begun to smell tired. The chairman sat on the edge of the low sofa with his coat still on, forearms on his knees, a paper cup of barley tea going cold between his shoes, and he did not say, "I'm sorry for your loss," which was the first decent thing about him. He said, 41 seconds, yes, and you kept it. It is what I have. She stacked the used cups without looking at them. 3, then 4, then 5, the way she did when she needed her hands occupied. The women were singing him out. I could hear maybe half. My cousin was crying, so the phone moved. He turned the cup a quarter turn on the floor and did not drink it. He had signed 11 documents for his father in the last 6 days. Cremation or burial, hall size, number of meal sets. Whether the death notice should carry the group's name, which the Public Relations Office had advised against and he had approved anyway at 1 a.m. from the back of a car. He had stood in that hall for 2 nights in a black suit, while men he employed bowed to him and murmured about the Hanoi plant, and he had felt precisely nothing, and the nothing had frightened him more than grief would have. Then a foreign woman in a gray work tunic and yellow rubber gloves had come in to change the water in the flower buckets, seen an empty room and a photograph of a man nobody had come for, and sung. "You sang for a stranger," he said, "because nobody was standing at your father's grave for you." Adaeze stopped stacking. "Partly," she said. "Not the way you mean it, sir." She set the cups down. "I came in and the room was loud with nothing. 12 chairs. 1 photograph. Not even a cousin arguing about money. Where I am from, we make noise so the person knows which way to walk. I could not leave him in that quiet." She looked at the framed photograph on the altar, at the old man's stubborn, unsmiling face, the mouth of a person who had refused people for a living. "And it is true that my throat had been closed for 11 months. It opened for him. Both things are true. I am not going to pretend only the beautiful one is." The chairman was quiet for a long moment. Outside in the corridor, a trolley wheel squeaked past and faded. 10 days, he said. Paid. A flight to Enugu and back, whatever route is fastest. Someone in my office will handle the visa re-entry papers. She had known some version of that was coming from the moment he sat down. She had even, briefly, let herself see it. The red road, her mother's hand, the mound with the concrete slab her brother had photographed from 4 angles because she had asked him to. "No," she said. He looked up. "If I take a plane from you tonight," Adaeze said, "then what I did in that room becomes a transaction, and I will not be able to think about your father again without also thinking about the price. Also," and here something dry moved through her voice, the first crack of humor in 3 days, "my sponsor's letter is my life. My contract says 32 hours minimum, 10 days off in December, and my agency will replace me by Thursday with a girl from Manila who does not ask questions, and then I will be the one at the immigration office at 11 at night, asking a stranger for help." Amara pushed the envelope back across the table with 2 fingers, the way a nurse returns a chart that has the wrong name on it. "So put that away, Mr. Yoon, before I begin to like the look of it." Yoon Do-jin did not move for a moment. Men had argued with him about acquisitions, about board seats, about the wording of press releases at 4 in the morning. Nobody had ever handed his money back and then made a joke to soften the blow. He slid the envelope into the inside pocket of his coat and left his hand there a second longer than necessary, as though checking that something else had not gone missing. "Then tell me what is not a transaction," he said. She took her time. That was the thing he would remember later, in the car, on the 9th floor of a building with his father's name on the granite. She did not fill the silence to be polite. She turned the paper napkin on the table over and over, the one with H. 435. Written on it in blue ballpoint, the number she had copied down 6 weeks earlier because an old man in a shared ward had hummed 4 notes at 3 a.m, and then asked, in a voice like paper tearing, whether she knew the words. Room 302, she said finally. It has 4 beds and 1 window. The window belongs to the bed nearest the door, which is where the newest patient goes, and the newest patient is usually the one who dies first, so the window is wasted on people who are already looking somewhere else. 2 of the call bells on that floor do not work. We tie a plastic spoon to the rail and tell the families to bang on the frame. There is 1 reclining chair for the whole 3rd floor, and last Tuesday a daughter slept sitting up on the floor beside her mother with her coat over her knees. She stopped. She had the habit of counting before asking, and he watched her count. A kettle in the family kitchen. The old one leaks. And do not put your name on it. Why not? Because then it becomes an apology, Amara said, and you have nothing to apologize to me for. Dojin took out a small notebook, black, worn soft at the corner, and a fountain pen, and wrote it down himself, not into a phone, not handed to the man standing by the door with the folded hands. Call bells, chair per room, kettle. He looked at the list, and then added 1 more line she could not read upside down, and closed the book. She was back at Mangwon Sarang Nursing Hospital by 10:50 that night, 12 minutes before her shift, which was as close as the 271 bus allowed. The building smelled the way it always smelled: rice porridge, antiseptic ointment, laundry soap, and, faintly under all of it, the sourness of bodies that no longer moved on their own. Amara clocked in on the machine that never read her thumbprint on the first try. She wheeled the trolley. At 1, she turned grandmother Seo, 40 degrees, pillow under the hip, and talked her through it in the mix of Korean and Igbo cadenced English the whole floor had grown used to. At 2, she warmed porridge for Pak Yong-soo in the bed beside the empty one, and he told her again that his son was coming from Busan on Saturday, and she said that was good. She would put out the good spoon, and she did not say what the night nurses said in the changing room, which was that the son had not come since March. At 2:40 she mopped the corridor. At 3 she stood by the window in room 302, the wasted window, and let herself be tired for 90 seconds. Then she went back to work. By Thursday, the hospital's group chat had the video. Team leader Ko called her into the office beside the laundry room and turned her phone sideways on the desk. 41 seconds, filmed from the back of a funeral hall, shaky, the lens catching the shoulders of men in black suits and, beyond them, 1 woman in a borrowed navy dress standing where the hired soloist had not arrived. The sound was terrible. It did not matter. The comment count under it was 108,000. Aunt Amara, said team leader Ko, who was 2 years younger than her. Do you know whose funeral that was? I know whose room it was, Amara said. The rest of Thursday arrived in pieces. Her agency coordinator called at 9 and used the word image 4 times. A reporter from an online outlet left a voicemail asking whether the family had compensated her and whether she wished to comment on the terms. Somebody in the comments had written, in English, that she had a voice from God. Somebody else, in Korean, had written that foreign workers always know where the money sleeps. The floor supervisor asked her twice, kindly, whether she had been paid, and each time the kindness sat slightly wrong, like a shoe on the correct foot in the wrong size. At 5:30, when she came out of the staff entrance with her bag and her sandals in a plastic bag, a black car was parked across from the ramp with its engine off. The rear door opened before the driver could get out, and a boy climbed down. 9, maybe 10. School uniform, socks slouched, hair still flattened on one side from sleeping against a car window. He carried a portable cassette player with both arms, the old kind, silver, the size of a lunchbox, and he carried it the way people carry something that belongs to someone dead. You sang the second verse too fast, he said. Amara set her bag down on the step. Did I? Grandfather sang it slower. Like this. He pressed a button with his thumb. 4 notes came out, thin and warped. An old man's voice under tape hiss, humming in a room with a beeping monitor behind it. The boy watched her face while it played, openly, the way children watch, checking his answer. See? Slower. Yes, she said. Her throat closed and then opened. He was right and I was wrong. I know. Yoon Ha-jun turned the machine off. My father says you refused money. Your father talks about me over breakfast? He doesn't talk at breakfast. The boy shifted the weight of the cassette player onto his hip. "Secretary Ryu has papers for you. He's been waiting an hour. He wouldn't let me come in and get you because he said it would embarrass you at your workplace." The man from the doorway of the tea room stepped out of the passenger side then, with a leather folder and an apology already arranged on his face, and handed her 3 pages, tabbed at the bottom with a small pink sticker where a signature belonged. Amara read standing up, in the cold, under the security light. The first page was a confidentiality undertaking. The second concerned images and recordings. The third contained a single line, printed in the flat courtesy of legal Korean, acknowledging that the undersigned had received consideration in the amount of 30 million won for services rendered at a private ceremony, and that no further claim existed. She looked up. "This says you paid me. It is standard," said Secretary Ryu. "It is a lie," said Amara, and did not take the pen he was already holding out. "Then correct it," she said, "and I will sign it." Secretary Ryu did not move for 3 seconds. In the cold, under the security light at the side entrance where staff cars idled and nobody photographed anything, he considered her the way a man considers a door that has opened the wrong way. Then he held out the leather folder like a desk. Amara took his pen, pressed the first page flat, and signed the confidentiality undertaking in full, her surname first, the way the forms in this country always wanted it. She signed the second page too, the one about images and recordings, and dated both. Her fingers were stiff. The ink dragged. The third page she folded into thirds and put into her coat pocket. "That is company paperwork," Ryu said. "That is a sentence about me that is not true." She capped the pen and returned it, handle first, a small courtesy that somehow landed harder than refusal. "Send someone for it when the number is gone. I will sign anything that is accurate." "You are making my work difficult." "I am making it correct," Amara said. "Those are different problems." She walked to the bus stop. She did not look back, because looking back would have made it a scene, and she had spent 4 years in Seoul learning exactly how much of a scene a woman like her could afford. On the 6716 she counted, out of old habit, what she had just declined. 30 million won was her mother's medication for 6 years. It was the transfer she made on the 28th of every month, made 12 times over, made without the small sick pause she always felt in the banking app when she confirmed the amount. It was a deposit on a room with a window. She sat with her hands in her lap and let the arithmetic finish itself. And when it was done, she did not feel noble. She felt tired and slightly cold and certain. In the car, Ryu made one call. He gave the facts in 9 sentences, the way he had been trained. There was a silence on the line long enough that he checked the screen. "Did she read all 3 pages?" the chairman asked, standing up, in the cold. "And she signed 2. 2. Another silence. "Leave it," the chairman said, and ended the call. And in the back of a parked sedan on the far side of the funeral hall, he sat with his phone in his hand and discovered that he was not angry. He was something less manageable than that. The video surfaced on Thursday. 41 seconds, vertical, shot through the gap between 2 shoulders in the 3rd row. The image shook. The sound did not need to be good. A woman in a borrowed black dress stood at the head of a hall banked with white crisson, themums, and sang with her hands loose at her sides. There was no accompaniment. There was no microphone. For the first 11 seconds of the clip, the room simply held still, the way a room does when something unplanned is happening and nobody has yet decided whether to be embarrassed. Then her voice found the low part of the hymn, and the phone's cheap microphone flattened it, and it did not matter. A man in the 2nd row lowered his head. A woman near the aisle put a tissue against her mouth. At the 34th second, the singer's voice broke on one word, recovered, and went on, and whoever was filming let out a breath that the microphone caught better than anything else in the hall. 41 seconds. Someone uploaded it at 8:12 on Thursday morning with 4 words of caption and no context at all. By noon it had 190,000 views. By Friday evening it had 1.4 million, and by Saturday the caption had mutated across 3 platforms into shapes she would never have recognized. A foreign woman crashes a chaebol funeral, hired mourner exposed. She knew exactly whose funeral it was. Some of the comments were tender in the way anonymous people can afford to be tender for 11 seconds. Some counted the cost of her dress and got it wrong by a factor of 30, since the dress belonged to a night shift coworker who had bought it in Dongdaemun for 19,000 won and had worn it twice, both times to funerals of people she had also not met. A commenter with a blue verification mark wrote that the family would sue. Another wrote that the family had paid her. Nobody wrote the simplest sentence available, which was that a 9-year-old boy had asked her, and she had said yes. On Monday morning, Director Yoon called her into the office behind the nurses' station at the care center, and the humidifier on the filing cabinet hissed through the entire conversation. "Have you seen it?" he asked. "Yes." "Did you post it?" "No." He turned his monitor toward her, which was unnecessary, and then turned it back, which was worse. He was not a cruel man. He had approved her Chuseok bonus 2 years running, and once driven her to the immigration office in his own car, because the shuttle bus did not go there. He kept his eyes on the desk calendar while he explained that there were 4 reporters at the front gate, that 2 of them had photographed the residents' garden, that the families of the residents had begun calling, and that the center had a policy about staff appearing in media without written permission. "I was not working," she said. "It was my day off. I swapped with Ha-yoon." "I know. The policy is about the residents. There were no residents there. I know that too." He aligned his pen with the edge of the calendar. "Take 2 weeks. Paid for 1. Unpaid for the 2nd. When it quiets, come back." She did the arithmetic while he was still speaking, because she had learned years ago to do arithmetic in real time rather than at night. 1 week unpaid was 340,000 won. Rent was due on the 9th. Her brother's school fees in Enugu were due on the 12th, and the exam fee for the Korean nursing licensure resit was 116,000 won, non-refundable, deadline Friday. She had budgeted all of it against a full month. There was room in the budget for illness. There was no room for going viral. 2 weeks, she repeated, and stood, and thanked him, because he had at least said it to her face instead of by message, and that was worth something in the ledger she kept of how people behaved. Her roommate was awake when she got home at 11, eating cold rice from the pot with the door of the refrigerator still open, because their kitchen was 2 steps wide, and there was no reason to close anything. "They are outside my church now," her roommate said. 2 men with a camera. "They asked Sister Grace if you sing professionally. What did she say?" "She said you sing flat on the high notes." Her roommate did not look up. She was defending you, in her mind. The borrowed dress hung on the back of the bathroom door. A white bead of candle wax dried into the hem where she had knelt to set down a chrysanthemum. She had meant to scrape it off with a butter knife and had not managed it yet. She sat on the floor with the hem across her knees, working at the wax with her thumbnail, and did not cry, and did not check her phone, and slept 4 hours before her body woke her at 5, out of habit for a shift she no longer had. 14 kilometers away, on the 38th floor of a building with his family's name cut into the granite of its lobby, the chairman's son watched the same 41 seconds for the 9th time that morning with the sound off. With the sound off, he could study the room, his father's photograph, garlanded, the chrysanthemums his aunt had ordered by the thousand, the rows of executives arranged by seniority, the ambassadors, the 2 former ministers, 300 people who had come to be seen coming, and a woman nobody had invited, standing where the paid soloist had failed to arrive, singing to a man she had never spoken to, in a hall where every other mouth had been closed for 2 days. Secretary Min waited by the door with a tablet. Team leader Ha, from communications, had already prepared 3 options and printed them, because he knew this office preferred paper. Option 1, silence, and a takedown request through the platform. Option 2, a statement clarifying that the soloist had been arranged by the family, which would fold the woman neatly into the program and end the story by Wednesday. Option 3, legal notice for unauthorized filming, aimed at the uploader, which would take the video down and put a different story in its place. The son read all 3. He set the pages face down and squared them with 2 fingers, the way his father had squared pages. "None of them," he said. Team leader Ha's voice stayed perfectly level. "The second option protects her as well, sir. It removes the accusation of intrusion. It also makes her a hired employee of this family. She was not." He turned back to the frozen frame on the screen, the woman's hands loose at her sides. "Find out her name. Not through the press, not through the platform. Find out where she works, whether she has been disciplined for this, and what she earns. And then?" He did not answer, because the honest answer was that he did not know yet, and men in his position were not permitted to say that out loud. At 6:40 the next morning, the security guard in her building rang the intercom to say there was a black sedan in the loading bay and a man in a gray suit downstairs who insisted he was not a journalist. Adaze had been home 31 minutes. Her shoes were still by the door with the hospital dust on them, her thermos was still warm, and the alarm on her phone was set for 1 o'clock so she could sleep before the afternoon shift. She pressed the intercom button twice before it worked. "A man in a gray suit," the guard repeated, in the flat voice of someone who had been awake all night and wanted to be right about something. "He has a car. He says he will wait." She went down in her scrubs with a cardigan over them because Pride was expensive and she had none to spend at 6:40 in the morning. The loading bay smelled of wet cardboard and yesterday's fish delivery. The sedan sat with its engine running, too clean for that street, and beside it stood a man of about 50 holding a paper bag with rope handles and a card case in his other hand. He bowed lower than he needed to. "Baek Sung-gyu," he said. "I am the chief of staff to Chairman So Jae-won, Hansong Group." He offered the card with both hands and waited, and when she took it he seemed relieved, as though the whole conversation had a form and they had now completed the first part of it correctly. "You attended a funeral at Jangmi Funeral Hall, room 3, on the 11th. You signed the guest book. Yours was the only name." "I know," she said. "The deceased was the chairman's father." The rain had stopped sometime before dawn and the drain by her feet was still swallowing it in small gulps. Adaeze looked at the card, at the raised letters, at the 4-digit extension printed under a Gangnam address, and thought about the photograph on the small altar. An old man in a brown jacket, taken years ago in front of a fruit shop, his hand raised as if he had been told to smile, and had raised his hand instead. Nobody had come. 2 attendants had folded chairs at the back of the room at 9 in the evening. She had been walking home from her shift and had stopped because the door was open and the room was lit and empty, and something in her had refused to let a man go into the ground without a voice over him. "I did not know his name until I saw the notice board," she said. "I sang the wrong things probably. I sang what my grandmother sang." "The chairman heard you." Beck held out the paper bag. "This is a condolence gift, and inside there is an envelope. The amount is 3 million won. It is customary." "Customary for what?" He hesitated, which she found more honest than anything he had said so far. "For gratitude." Adaeze did not take the bag. She had a rooftop room that cost 480,000 a month, a sister at the University of Nigeria whose fees were due in 5 weeks, and a nursing license exam in March that required a preparatory course she had not yet paid for. 3 million won was not an abstraction to her, it was the exact shape of her next 4 months, and she could feel the weight of it before it ever touched her hand. "Please tell him thank you," she said, "and please take it back." Beck's expression did not change, but his thumb moved once against the rope handle. "May I ask why?" "Because if I take money for it, then it becomes work, and it was not work." She glanced up at the gray sky over the rooftops, at the water tank, at her own laundry hanging under the eave where she had left it 2 days ago. "I will ask for one thing, if it is allowed, please. His name, properly, not from a board." She pushed her hands into the cardigan pockets. "Where he was born, what he liked to eat, whether he had brothers. When I pray for someone, I like to know who I am talking about. I have been praying for a photograph for 6 days. For a long moment the only sound was the engine and the drain. Then Bake took a small notebook from his inside pocket, wrote something, tore the page out, folded it once, and held it out with both hands the way he had held the card. At 8:15, on the 22nd floor of a building in Yeouido, where the windows did not open, Bake stood in front of a desk with the paper bag still in his hand and reported 4 sentences without decoration. Chairman Seo Jae-won listened without moving. He had slept 4 hours. On the credenza behind him sat a black-framed photograph he had not yet decided where to hang, and beside it a funeral guest book with 1 line of handwriting in it, the Korean letters formed slowly and carefully, the way a person writes in a language they have taught themselves at night. "She refused it," he said. "She asked for his name," Beck said, "and what he liked to eat." Jae-won turned the guest book so the light fell across the page. He had spent 9 years not speaking to his father and 11 days learning what that cost. He said nothing for so long that Beck began to plan his exit. "Find out if her agency has opened a case against her," Jae-won said at last. They had. Adaeze learned it at 12:50, before her alarm, when her supervisor called and asked her to come to the agency office in Yunpyeong instead of the ward. Ms. Ha had a printout on the desk, turned to face her. Someone had filmed 40 seconds of it on a phone from the corridor. The empty rows of chairs, the white chrysanthemums, a tall woman in hospital scrubs standing at the altar with her hands folded, singing something nobody in the comments could identify. 200,000 views by Monday. The care hospital's name was legible on her badge in the 9th second. "You were off duty," Ms. Ha said, "but you were in uniform and you entered a funeral hall connected to a patient who died under our care. and you did not report it. There is a complaint from the hospital's administration about the video." She turned the paper around again. 7 days suspension, unpaid. I argued it down from 14. Adeze read the form twice. 7 days was 630,000 won, which was the preparatory course, or the fees, or neither. "I will sign it," she said. She came out of the office at 1:30 into a corridor that smelled of instant coffee, and on the plastic chairs by the door, a boy of about 9 sat in a school uniform with his backpack on his knees, alone, holding a funeral guest book against his chest, as though someone had told him not to put it down. The boy did not look up when she sat 2 chairs away. He shifted the guest book an inch toward his knee, the way people move a bag when they have decided to let someone nearer, and she saw the cover then, dark green, gold characters, the same book that had lain open on a table in Ilsan at 9 at night with almost nothing written in it. 22, he said. 22 what? Names. He turned the book so she could see. Some of them are drivers. They had to sign. Adeze read down the column. Her own handwriting sat near the bottom, once in careful Korean letters, once in English underneath, because she had not been sure which one counted. "You wrote it twice," Hangul said. "Nobody else did that. I was not sure I was allowed to be there at all." He accepted this. 9-year-olds are the last honest auditors in the world. Then he asked, without any of the softening adults use, whether she would come on the 49th day, because his father would not ask her, and his grandaunt would say no, and somebody should sing so his grandfather knew that a person had stayed. She did the arithmetic in her chest, the way she always did. 2 shifts traded, the bus fare, the 11 months of repayments she had signed her name to 20 minutes earlier, at a desk upstairs, for a licensing preparation course she had insisted on taking as a loan rather than a gift, with a schedule of installments she had asked them to print out, so she could carry it in her purse. "I will come," she said. The photograph appeared 11 days later. Someone had sold a still frame from the funeral hall's corridor camera, a Nigerian woman in a borrowed black cardigan, mouth open mid-note, and beyond her a coffin with almost no one in front of it. By Thursday, the captions had decided what she was, a paid mourner, a performance hired to cover a family's absence, an immigrant who had found the richest grief in Seoul and knelt in it. Seo Myung-hui summoned her to a tea room in Junggu with an envelope already on the table. "Write a figure," the older woman said, "then travel somewhere for a season." Adeze folded her hands. "I have a figure." She took the printed schedule from her purse and laid it flat, smoothing the crease. 900,000 won a month. 11 months. "That is what I owe, and I am paying it." I sang because a man was being carried out of a room with nobody in it. You may believe that or not. It cost the same either way. Myung-hui looked at the paper for a long moment and did not touch the envelope again. The memorial on the 49th day was held in the Hansong Hall, which meant board members, 3 cameras, and a floral arrangement taller than the boy. Seo Jin-ho went to the lectern and did not speak about his father's vision or his own gratitude for the group's continued trust. He set the dark green guest book down, opened it, and read the 22 names aloud, slowly, including the drivers, including the woman who had signed hers twice. Then he closed it. "My father was carried out of a room with 4 relatives in it, and all 4 of us were on our phones," he said. "A stranger stayed. I have asked her to sing again. If anyone here finds that embarrassing, the embarrassment is mine, and it is deserved." She sang the hymn her grandmother had sung over every grave in Nsuka, in Igbo, unaccompanied, and 300 people in a hall built for quarterly results learned what silence could hold. The cameras kept rolling. The share price did what share prices do, and recovered in 9 days, and by then the story in the papers had quietly changed shape. She kept her room in Durham. That mattered to her more than she could explain to a man who owned 4 buildings, the key in her own hand, the rent from her own account, the right to walk away at any hour without owing an explanation. He learned to ask instead of arrange. She learned to say the true answer rather than the polite one. They ate dinner in her kitchen more often than in his, because Han-gyeol had opinions about her stew and none about hotel plates. The loan was cleared in 11 months, 5 days early. She framed nothing, she simply threw the schedule away, and then took it out of the bin again and kept it in a drawer. Myung-hui came in October with a box of persimmons and stayed 2 hours, correcting Adaeze's pronunciation of her own married-in relatives' titles, refusing to admire anything aloud, accepting a second bowl. That was the whole of the approval, and both women understood it. The guest book lives on the shelf above the rice cooker now. Han-gyeol appropriated it. He writes down everyone who eats in the house, the nursing tutor, the neighbor with the loud dog, his football coach, twice, because the coach came twice. 206 names, last count, and he announces the running total on the first of every month like a small, dry accountant. On the night she passed the licensing exam, she stood at the sink washing rice and hummed the hymn without noticing she had started. Jinho stopped in the doorway with a dish towel in his hand and stayed there, saying nothing, because he had finally learned what to do with a sound. Hangyo looked up from the open book, pen ready. "Sing it louder," he said, "so everyone knows somebody stayed."